in our co-main event, we have a highly anticipated rematch between two top featherweights. Brandon, what you got for us on this matchup?
All right, in our co-main event, we have the number 2 Yair El Pantera Rodriguez versus number 4 Brian T. City Ortega. And Yair is coming off of his third-round stoppage loss to former champion Alex Volkanovski. Prior to that, Yair was the winner of 3 of his last 4, with wins over Jeremy Stevens, Brian Ortega, and winning the interim championship over Josh Emmett. Brian T. City has had a mixed run of form over the last 5 years, going 1-2 since losing the title fight to Max Holloway all the way back in 2018. In that time span, Ortega was a win over Zombie, and then 2 back-to-back losses to former champ Alex Volkanovski as well, and to Yair Rodriguez in their fight a couple years ago. This also marks the second time in Ortega's career he's going on almost 2 years without a fight. This most recent absence came as a result of blowing out his shoulder in the first round of his fight against Yair.
Who you got?
In this one, I'm going to go with Yair. So last time when these guys fought, I picked Ortega, and I think I picked him last time because he has the submission abilities to finish anybody. But he has the same problem that Mackenzie Dern does in the lack of ability to get it to the floor. Now, the difference with Ortega is that he does have some good hands, but not good enough to beat Yair. In that first fight, there wasn't much to it. I think it was only about 2 minutes at the most, and Yair was piecing up Ortega. So I'm going to take Yair. I don't think he finishes Ortega because Ortega is incredibly tough, but I just don't see Ortega coming back with the layoff and showing any increased wrestling ability, like a really good double leg. And even if he does get it to the ground, Yair's got a pretty good submission game as well in jiu-jitsu. So I'm taking Yair by decision. And yeah, man, I don't like guys when they go on these long layoffs like that. And this is the second one for Ortega, so give me Yair.
Yeah, this is probably 2 of the least active guys in the division who kind of stay at the top. Yair's had some issues of trying to stay consistent, fighting multiple times a year, and then obviously Ortega now with the injury, and like you said, he's had some history with it. Obviously, I was always going to say Yair in this because he's part of the club, but I think for Ortega, what's tough is you have all that time out with the shoulder. And I don't know if you, and especially talking about possibly retiring, I don't know that you worked on the things you need to work on when it comes to like wrestling or even diversifying your striking. And for Yair, Nathan had talked about the elevation. Yair, he stays in Mexico. I think he's probably a big part of their PI system that they're trying to put up. He's always like
he trains in Chicago though.
Well, I know he's in Mexico a lot because there's times where you'll see him hitting pads up like on the Mayan temples and stuff. Like I think he travels a lot. So I think that and then just we talked about him getting the belt for the interim, having like the custom belt, but bringing that even energy into Mexico City. I think he's going to get a huge pop as well, and I think that he's going to ride that energy with him. So I'm going to take Yair. I will say, I think he gets him out of there second round TKO.
Yeah, interesting one here. I do think it's so easy kind of to count out Ortega just based off the time away, like kind of what Brandon was saying there. But I think with how elite Ortega's grappling is, that's not necessarily as big of a deal for me. Because if we learned one thing from the Yair versus Volk fight is, though Yair has shown a good guard from his back, he can be taken down and controlled. And I would say Ortega is an even better grappler than Volk in that regard, obviously. But one thing that kind of stood out to me from their last fight, as short as it was the striking advantage that Yair had. I mean, he was so much quicker and sharper than Ortega that night. And I picked Ortega in that fight against Yair, but I said, having seen even as little as we did in that fight, I would pick Yair if they were to rematch. And here we are, obviously, and that's about to go down, even with all the time that has passed. But I think that time only benefits Yair Rodriguez. Ortega is super durable, has that Mexican toughness and chin. So I don't know that Yair's going to finish him. I think it would take some sort of doctor stoppage, essentially, much like we saw in the Max fight to get Ortega out.
Their first fight.
Yeah. And I do still think there's a lot to like about Ortega in this matchup. But again, with how fast Yair found success in that last fight, and especially one thing I zeroed in on and rewatching was Yair was really starting to get on Ortega's lead leg early. And against a guy like Ortega who likes to march forward and use his pressure, I think that is going to be a good game plan for Yair, and I think we're going to see it again. And also, when timing is everything in the stand-up, I think it could just take Ortega a minute, even if it's just a couple rounds to get that rhythm on the feet, which then you have to question at that point, what kind of damage has Yair done in the fight. So then I'm just kind of at that point banking on Ortega just getting the fight down if I were to pick him, which may maybe he can, but it's all just too uncertain for me to pick him here. So I will also take Yair Rodriguez. I do like the decision. Brandon took that. So let's say 3rd round KO TKO for Yair Rodriguez.
Well, and what's tough about that too is Yair's never been submitted either. So it's like he'd have to be the first one to do that too for when it comes to Ortega. But very interested to see how that turns out, man.